at the University of London and Stanford University. His primary academic interests revolve around exploring the intricate relationships between law and politics, particularly from a legislative studies perspective. Zamboni has a considerable list of publications to his credits, notable of which include Law and Legal Theoretical Framework, Constitutional Courts, Activism and the Relationship between Law and Politics, a legal theoretical contribution, to mention just a few. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Mauro Zamboni to speak to us on whom should legislation be for.
Thank you very much, Anna, for this generous introduction. So my name is Mauro Zamboni and President of VIAL. And before I will start this keynote speech, I would like just to share with you a thought that I had these 3 years that I collaborated with the AFRIPAL organization committee when they contacted me as in quality of President of the International Association of Legislation. The words that I've heard mostly during these 3 years, also as John mentioned, is youth, young youth, young youth. And in particular, the idea that the African continent is the youngest continent in the world. And of course, being a legal scholar, in particular, an old legal scholar, I was very bitter at the beginning, yes? But then during these 3 years, actually, I've seen the depth of this stressing the fact, the character of youth, the character of young, because AFRIPAL testifies the strength of youth. The strength of youth is not to be only operate based on the established culture, established truth, but as I've noticed in these 3 years, the force of the youth is to be innovative. And actually, if you see the program of AFRIPAL this year, is extremely innovative, and it is a lesson for all the other similar organizations around the world. In this respect then, and I conclude this brief personal introduction, in quality of President of the International Association of Legislation, I would like to thank very much AFRIPAL, because in these 3 years, we at YAL have learned much more than we have taught you. Really, thank you very much. Because you did an amazing job. Perfect. Then, the title of my presentation is Whom Should the Legislation Be For? Perfect. Thank you. Legislation is the cornerstone of governance. It not only codifies societal norms and structures, but also delineates the boundaries within which public life unfolds. Although legal texts are often seen as universal instruments intended for every citizen, a closer examination of the legislative process reveals that they are rarely addressed to an undifferentiated audience. Instead, lawmakers craft these texts with a specific ideal-typical addressee in mind. This presentation interrogates a fundamental question then: for whom should legislation truly be written? To begin with, we must dispel the assumption that legislation can or should speak equally to all people. In my framework, I've identified 4 primary ideal-typical audiences that legislative text typically could or should aim to reach. First, the general audience. These are lay citizens without formal legal training. When legislation is addressed to this audience, it must be accessible in both language and structure. That means avoiding legal jargon, using familiar terms, and offering contextual clarification. Second, we have the specific audience. This audience includes groups or stakeholders with direct interest in the legislation, such as businesses, unions, or industry associations. Although they do not often have legal training, they are capable of interpreting laws relevant to their fields, provided the text is clear, structurally coherent, and supported by targeted clear legal clarifications. Thirdly, the legal audience, comprising judges, lawyers, academics, and regulatory experts. This audience is familiar with legal terminology, precedent, and interpretative methodologies. For this group, legislation must be precise, systematic, and embedded in the broader legal framework. Legal drafting aimed at this audience assumes a deep understanding of statutory logic and an ability to navigate complex references and doctrinal nuances. Fourthly, the internal audience. These are the institutional actors responsible for drafting and enforcing laws, legislative drafters, public officials, and bureaucrats. This group is immersed in organizational memory and technical specialization. Legislation aimed at the internal audience prioritizes consistency, technical precision, and legal coherence over readability for the broader public. The claim that the legislation should simultaneously address the need of four distinct groups, that is the general public, specialized stakeholders, legal professionals, and internal bureaucrats, is unrealistic. Given the inherent complexity and technical nature of legal text, it is virtually impossible to craft a single legislative act that is equally accessible and effective for all. For example, if a legislative text is designed for the general audience, it must avoid technical legal terminology, which would otherwise be necessary for the legal audience to fully grasp the act's legal presumptions and consequences.